The profit rises. It took me 2 months to summon up the nerve to ask Rich for a baby for real. I wasn't in love with him yet, but I did feel attracted to him. I thought if I had a baby with him, I'd feel love for him, although I didn't even know what that meant, to be in love with someone. As Rich was leaving to do night watch at grandfather's one evening, I said, "Can I come with you? I need to talk to you." Rich hesitated for a moment, knowing that his other wives would be angry if he let me come. The picnic had not erased the animus my sister wives felt toward me, or made them treat me any nicer. "Sneak out to my trucker," Rich said. I knew sneaking was unnecessary. Our house was so small, it wouldn't take long for the other ladies to notice I was missing. So I just walked out the front door, wondering why he couldn't be a man about what he wanted to do. Father never cared what his wives thought of him. If he chose to favor one wife, he did so openly, in front of the whole family. It was no secret which of his wives were his favorites. Father was like a king in his household, and the women bowed to his every command. They stood around, eager for the privilege of handing him his spoon, or washing the table after he'd finished eating. It was the highest honor to be the wife chosen to make his meal. Rich didn't come out of the house for half an hour. I knew he was trying to make the other ladies feel okay about his taking me with him, giving them a little extra attention so they would feel special. There was a big learning curve. Living polygamy. As a sister wife, you might sleep with your husband 1 night out of 6, or 14, or 90, depending on your husband's whim. Rich was also on night watch a lot, so that reduced the opportunity as well. The church teaches that it is good for a man to have multiple wives, so you cannot be angry at him for sleeping with his other wives. Living polygamy, you have to let go of your selfishness regarding your husband. You have to control the jealousy that comes naturally to us, not only because we are taught that jealousy is a grievous sin, but because it will make you crazy. But even though I grew up in this lifestyle, and I was used to it, once it became my reality as a sister wife, I realized how hot it was. It took me an hour to finally tell Rich what I wanted that night. "Really? Are you sure?" he said. "I'm sure." Rich was very pleased with my request, and happy to oblige. He kept me with him for several nights in a row after that, trying for a baby. I found it very painful at first. Despite my past sexual experience, I had never done this part of it before. I was very scared and tense in the beginning, which probably made it even worse. I wanted to keep as many of my clothes on as possible, and Rich was kind and let me do as I pleased. Life with my husband's other ladies got much harder then. Trish and Molly started to accuse Rich of favoritism, and would try to get in the way of our budding relationship. Nights when Rich called me to his room, the other ladies would suddenly need to speak to him about a very urgent matter. Sometimes they put little Netta to sleep in Rich's room, so that nothing could happen between us. More than once, one of them would bang on the window so hard, I thought the glass would break. At times I was angry that Rich allowed his other ladies to get between us. And then, despite all their efforts, I was pregnant. I had been with my husband only 3 times. That's all it took. The church forbids husbands from having relations with a pregnant wife, so once my sister wives learned I was carrying a child, they stopped being jealous and mean to me, because they had him to themselves for the duration. By then we had moved out of the tiny house that Rich had brought me to after our wedding. Father had taken my complaint about our cramped living situation seriously, for which I was very grateful. We were temporarily living in the basement apartment in Rich's father's house until a new house was built for us. The old red house was fairly new, and the basement had 4 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, so all of us ladies had our own rooms and we weren't in one another's business so much. But the jealous wives still kept close tabs on Rich, which was easy to do, because the bathroom adjacent to Rich's room had 2 entrances, one from the bedroom and one from the hall, so whenever he was showering with one of his wives, anyone listening at the door could hear them talking. I spent most of my time in my own room, since the apartment lacked a central living area. I liked having my own space, and it was comfortable. Father had bought a bedroom set for me because Rich couldn't afford one, so I had a queen-size bed, a nice oak dresser with a large mirror, and a nightstand. It was a lot better than the ratty old couch. One night in late summer, when I was about 4 months along, Rich came by my room to say good night. We lay on the floor, talking. My feelings for him had grown a lot, and I had learned to trust him. So when he asked me that night how I knew about sex, I decided it was time to finally tell someone. I didn't dare share any details, not even how long it had gone on, because I feared what his reaction might be. I kept it short and vague, but it was enough. Rich immediately stood up and left the room without saying anything. I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. I lay on my bed and thought, Rachel, you should have just kept quiet. I tried to make myself go to sleep, but I couldn't because I was worried about what Rich was thinking about me after what I had told him. A few hours later, Rich came back to my room and locked the door. He got undressed, and then he undressed me. If you weren't pregnant right now, I would be with you, he said. Rich held me close for a while, and I cried against his bare shoulder. It felt good to get even a tiny bit of my childhood hurt out. But Rachel, please don't say any more, he said. I don't want to know, because it will be too hard on my testimony of your father, meaning his belief that father was a good and honorable priesthood man who stood next to the prophet. The next evening Rich called me from grandfather's house, where he was on watch. I wrote a letter to your father about what you told me. He wants to see us in his office right now. My blood went cold. Father would be angry that I had told, and I didn't want to face him. But as always, I had no choice. I got in our family beater car and drove up to grandfather's. When I got there, Rich took my hand, and we walked to father's office. Richard, you please close the door, father said, and he gestured for us to take a seat. He gave me a look filled with hurt, as though to say, how could you do this to me? I looked down at my feet. Father still had full control over my life, and this betrayal surely meant he would never treat me the same again. He could do with me what he chose. After a silence that seemed to last forever, father said, I always knew that I would one day have to talk to Rachel's husband about my relationship with her. And yes, I confess that in teaching Rachel, I got too close to her. I ask your forgiveness. Just know I am here to do my father's will. Teaching, that's what that was. Father shook both our hands and opened his office door. Thank you, Rich said to father as we walked out. I said nothing. When we got in the truck, Rich said, Rachel, we have to trust that he is in a leading position for a reason. I don't ever want to question him again, so let's not talk about this. As it was my duty to obey my husband, I merely nodded my head. What small relief I'd felt confiding in Rich quickly faded. A couple of things changed for Rich and me after that meeting with father. The first affected Rich. Father made sure to make Rich feel needed and important to him, keeping him close by his side always, first as counselor, and then by making him a bishop, a leader in the church. The second affected me. From then on, I was largely kept away from my own family. Months, sometimes years, would pass when I didn't have any contact with my closest sisters. Father required us to live states apart with no freedom to visit, write, or talk to one another. Grandfather Rulon was admitted to the hospital on the evening of September 7, 2002, with an intestinal blockage that required surgery. By then he was 86 years old and frail. Rich and I joined father and a few other family members, Mother Mary, Uncle Nephi, Uncle Isaac, and one of Isaac's ladies in the waiting room early the next morning, waiting for word from the surgeon. Father told us to pray and fast for grandfather to be healed. Finally, the surgeon came out and reported that grandfather was very weak after the surgery, and they weren't sure he was going to pull through. He is going to make it, father said. Make sure he makes it. Around noon that day, the doctors reported that grandfather was failing. You must do CPR, father said. The medical team, doctors and nurses and technicians, worked for nearly an hour trying to save grandfather. Father insisted they keep going. Father had promised the people many times that grandfather would be renewed and become a young man again in this life. And when that happened, father said, we, the people, had better be prepared for the great lifting up, when the destructions would cover the land and only the righteous would remain. We were with grandfather in the ICU when he died that afternoon. Father cried. I had never seen father cry before. It was Sunday, so the people in Short Creek had gathered at the meeting house. Father called over there to announce grandfather's passing. The members of the FLDS had been told that their leader would never die, that his renewal was necessary for their survival. Instead, now they would have to follow another Father had been acting leader of the church ever since grandfather's stroke 4 years earlier, so the transition was perhaps less jarring than it might have been. Father had been making decisions and arranging marriages all that time with grandfather's counsel, and he was careful in announcing that he was their new leader, relying on the testimony of his brothers and grandfather's wives to tell them. But there was a catch. We had been taught that an apostle, like grandfather, had to name the next apostle, and grandfather had never ordained father to the apostleship, and the people knew this. So always, father had an explanation for everything. Not long after grandfather's passing, father told the people, God had come down into father's bedroom and ordained him an apostle himself. I hadn't forgot what father had said to me at Uncle Roy's funeral when I was a little girl. The prophet is the greatest man on earth. The prophet is the only man worthy of hearing God's word. I knew father was a good enough man. Soon after that, father went on the